There's a slight change to our program. Dr. Kluge is unable to join us, but we have on video, is that ready to go? Yes, okay. Dr. Gundo Weiler. I'm looking to see when he comes up.
Hello, I'm online. I hope you can hear me.
No? Hello. Thank you. Dr. Gundo Weiler has more than 20 years of experience with WHO, supporting countries in Europe, Asia, and Africa to develop integrated approaches to health, development, and emergencies. Dr. Weiler is currently Director for Country Support and Emergencies at the WHO Regional Office for Europe. Previously, he has served as Director for Data, Strategy, and Innovation at WHO Regional Office for Western Pacific, WHO representative to the Philippines, and he has been the coordinator for global HIV and hepatitis programs, and was the communicable disease coordinator for the Ukraine, among many other assignments. Dr. Weiler has led organizational change processes at WHO offices at country, regional, and global levels. He's aiming to render the WHO more effective in helping countries build effective, and I like this term he used, future-proof health systems that are based on evidence, innovation, strategic information, and systems transformation. Dr. Weiler holds a degree in medicine from Humboldt University in Berlin and a doctoral degree in social medicine from the Free University of Berlin and a degree in health systems management from the University of London. We welcome Dr. Weiler as he addresses us on how can solidarity be put into practice, some concrete cases. Welcome, Dr. Weiler.
Thank you very much. Madam President Tarantola, dear Chairperson, Excellencies, distinguished guests, let me begin by sharing Dr. Kluge's deepest apologies for not being able to address you in person today due to illness. He was indeed really honored to be part of such an illustrious event with world-renowned speakers, and I know he was looking forward to this valuable exchange very much. So the regional director of the European region for WHO asked me to address you on his behalf, and it is indeed my privilege to do so. Solidarity forms the essence of the World Health Organization's constitution. The attainment by all peoples of the highest possible level of health has been our guiding principle for more than 70 years now. WHO brings together public health and the human right to health for all through multilateralism. We unite a wide range of stakeholders to deliver health for everyone. There's both the scientific imperative and the ethical responsibility to work together for the public good. Solidarity comes from both the head and the heart. And it is a conscious choice to take decisive action with others for a common cause. These are the values that are also the bedrock for the WHO Regional Office of Europe current program of work, which is called United Action for Better Health in Europe. And that is the guiding our activities across the 53 countries in the European region to deliver health and well-being to almost 1 billion people we serve. I would like to speak about 3 examples of solidarity for health with you today. So let me begin by looking back through history to share a pertinent example of how solidarity has delivered fundamental public health gains. Are you familiar with the name Ali Maouf Malin? He was a hospital cook and a health worker from Somalia, and the last known person to have been infected with naturally occurring variola minor, smallpox. He was diagnosed with the disease in October 1977 at the age of 23 and fortunately made a full recovery. Until about 40 years ago, smallpox was a serious life-threatening illness. Up to 1/3 of people who contracted the virus died. It had plagued humanity for at least 3,000 years and killed 300 million people in the 20th century alone. But in 1980, the World Health Organization declared that smallpox was eradicated from the face of the earth. It was eradicated because the global community worked together in solidarity to ensure that everyone received the life-saving smallpox vaccine. This required a 10-year effort spearheaded by WHO, with thousands of health workers around the world administering 500 million vaccinations at a cost of $300 million. Key to success was innovation, production of a high-quality freeze-dried vaccine, coordination, the establishment of a case surveillance system, and universality. The vaccine was administered through mass vaccination campaigns. It is estimated that with smallpox eradicated, the world has saved over 1 billion per year since 1980. Again, a moral and an economic reason for solidarity. Having survived smallpox, Marianne focused his energies on ridding the world of another communicable disease, polio. He became a staunch advocate for vaccination and was involved in the successful poliomyelitis eradication campaign in Somalia. Thanks to coordinated efforts, the world is now on the brink of eradicating polio too. The European region was certified free from polio in 2002. And as of 2020, the wild polio virus type 1 affects 2 countries only, Pakistan and Afghanistan. Tragically, Marianne died in 2030 at the age of 59 from yet another deadly disease, malaria. Malaria transmission was interrupted in the WHO European region in 2015, but still threatens almost half of the world's population. But we are making progress. And as you've perhaps heard in the news recently, WHO recommended the use of a malaria vaccine amongst children in areas affected by the disease. With the promise of the vaccine, through consolidated efforts and with solidarity, we can effectively tackle communicable diseases that still blight and cut short so many lives. Another example of solidarity for health relevant to all of us today is road safety. Road trauma kills more people aged 5 to 29 than any other cause in 53 countries of the European region. However, since 2000, deaths at all ages have fallen by almost half. Reducing the number of deaths and the many serious injuries that occur on our roads requires implementation of evidence-based policies and actions across a range of sectors to put health first. This means enacting and enforcing legislation on speed, drink driving, the use of seatbelts, helmets, child restraints. It also requires road infrastructure to take account of safety of all road users. And it calls for manufacturers to improve the safety of vehicles through features such as electronic stability control and advanced braking. Finally, effective and timely emergency care in the event of a crash is needed to improve survival rates. From legislators to manufacturers, from health service providers to urban planners, promoting road safety requires action in each separate focus area in solidarity. Yet, when combined, these activities provide a safety net that addresses the complexities of keeping people moving while protecting their health. To working together from local to national levels and across sectors to lower risk factors, road safety can and is being improved. Now, I cannot speak of solidarity without referring to the global pandemic that is still affecting all of us. It is heartbreaking to see that almost 5 million people around the world have lost their lives to the virus. My thoughts and prayers are with their families and loved ones, but it is, of course, heartwarming to have witnessed and been part of the extraordinary outpouring of support and consolidated efforts that have meant that essential services have continued and that we've maintained personal contact with each other. This is a testament to the strength of the human spirit, and that does act in the collective interest in times of difficulty. Our frontline workers demonstrate this solidarity on a daily basis. Since the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic response, WHO based its work on the principle of solidarity, providing a global response to a global challenge. 20 months of evidence demonstrate that going it alone doesn't work. The world needs to approach the pandemic in a multi-country, multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary, and multilateral way. And it needs to build the experiences and lessons learned from the pandemic to address the systemic issues, the wicked problems that enabled it to occur. The third and last example of solidarity I would briefly like to speak about today begins back in April 2020. At that time, last year, Dr. Kluge called on the preeminent figure, Professor Mario Monti, president of Bocconi University and former Prime Minister of Italy and a former European Commissioner, to lead a commission to reflect on the lessons of the current pandemic and make recommendations on investments and reforms to improve the resilience of health and social care for when we face the next. He and the other 19 leading lights from the political, academic, financial, and economic spheres came together as the Pan-European Commission on Health and Sustainable Development. Now, last month, this independent commission published its findings and recommendations, and these underline the interlinkages between human, animal, and environmental health, the long-standing underinvestment in health systems and social care, as well as the increasing deep-seated inequalities between and within societies that have created mistrust and left many impoverished and vulnerable. Now, I can't and don't want to go through the Commission's recommendations in detail, but one of their key proposals is to implement the concept of One Health. This has solidarity as its core. It offers a whole of society approach to health and well-being, where all policies take the health of all living things and their shared environment into account. This One Health approach sees our well-being as inextricably linked to the health of the planet and the natural environment. The Commission calls on governments to establish cross-government One Health strategies and that international health and environmental agencies collaborate more closely. Yet it requires all sectors at all levels to work together and promote and prioritize health. Human activities such as deforestation, the trade and consumption of wildlife, and international travel are thought to have led to the emergence of COVID-19 and facilitated its global spread. We and our descendants now face a precarious future unless we all take urgent action to correct course. Let me take this opportunity to encourage you to read the full report published on the WHO Europe website. Now today, as we reflect on the examples of solidarity, we must look to the discussions and deliberations that will be taking place in Glasgow in a few days at the COP26. The climate crisis is the greatest test to solidarity that we face today. And it is also a health crisis, putting an overwhelming pressure on health systems. It drives the spread of vectors and pathogens, including the mosquito that spreads malaria. It affects mental health, threatens livelihoods, exacerbates non-communicable diseases, and causes injuries and malnutrition. A focus on climate health and its health impact is integrated into every WHO policy. No country, no person is safe from the effects of climate change. Climate change disproportionately affects the most vulnerable, so addressing it is also a way of fighting inequity. Solidarity is not charity or altruism. It is the only way we can tackle the borderless challenges that affect us all. In closing, I would like to underline crisis triggered change. COVID-19 provides an opportunity to rethink services and close gaps that have been magnified by a lack of solidarity. The virus has exposed societal fractures. Both evidence and our experience tell us that dedication, solidarity, equity, and science are what helps push obstacles out of the way. The eradication of smallpox, progress on road safety, are proof of what we are capable of if we work together for a common goal. We need to hold on to our faith in humanity. The pandemic will leave profound footprints in our memories, but it has also paved the way for an invaluable understanding of health as a precondition for economies and societies, that health is a bond between people and our planet, and that each of us have an invaluable role to play. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, and I hope you could remain with us for the question and answer period through 11:30.
With great pleasure.
Thank you, thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Marianne Wolff, Professor in Residence and Dean of the Center for Dyslexia, Diverse Learners, and Social Justice at UCLA, and a member of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, and an external advisor to the International Monetary Fund. Professor Wolff completed her doctorate at Harvard University, where she also began her work in cognitive neuroscience and psycholinguistics on the reading brain, language, and dyslexia. Dr. Wolff is the author of more than 160 scientific articles, and she designed the RAVE-O reading intervention for children with dyslexia, and co-authored the RAN-RAS naming speed tests, a major predictor of dyslexia across all languages. She is the recipient of numerous awards and recognitions, including a Fulbright Fellowship, the Chapman University Presidential Fellow, and the Norman Gershwin and Samuel Orton Awards, the highest awards and honors from the International Dyslexia Association. Dr. Wolff will address us on education for people with disabilities as a factor of social justice and progress. Dr. Wolff.
Thank you so very much. It's my pleasure to be here, to be a representative of the youngest of our species and also some of the most vulnerable. And I will be giving you a case study, if you will, of how science, in this case, neuroscience, can help address some of the major issues in our children. And I will be making various assumptions here. Let's see, make sure this works. Okay. My first, and I will be in Milano next week, but UCLA looks very much like St. Ambrose. For those of you who know this, it will make you more familiar with where I come from. In our center, we have one very basic mission, and it will be a leitmotif through this talk, and that is that literacy is a basic human right. But from a neuroscience viewpoint, it is that which literally changes the platform, the very circuit, the neural networks that allow us to become a full human being. My talk today is more about those who are the most vulnerable. Those are people who are disenfranchised by the fact that they learn differently. And among learning disabilities, there will be one in particular that is most important, that is the failure to acquire literacy. Now, there are many different kinds of disabilities. In my talk, I will only have the time to focus, as you did, on one area, and that is the area of reading disabilities. But I use this beautiful quote from Jean Gru, who said something that will help me reconceptualize the very idea of disabilities for you here. And he said this: at some point, I stopped thinking about myself as someone who needed repairing. And last evening, Monsignor, I think his last name is Galantino, asked us, what do we do next? Well, I want to relate that, and I look at Monsignor Sanchez Sorando, who knows that I use Kant often. And Kant always asks, what do we know? What do we hope? And I will use Monsignor Galantino, what do we do next? And so my whole talk is going to end with ideas, as Ana Maria last night told us, what are the ways that we can reconceptualize an educational model? And so my entire talk is to be geared towards that end. I am beginning, however, with a quotation from Pope Francis, which I almost had memorized. I told this to the Radio Vatican last night. He said that education is one of the most effective ways of making our world and history more human. Education is above all a matter of love and responsibility handed down from one generation to another. From a science viewpoint, nothing could be more true about what has happened and what has not happened in the last days, last years, thanks to COVID, where we do not have that same relationship. There is a new study in Canada that suggests that the educational fragmentation in these last 2 years is the equivalent of a loss of $1 trillion in Canada. What I want to suggest to you are 3 premises. And last year, it sounds like you had an entire meeting on education. I wish I had been there. My premises would have been the same. Education is a platform for the development of full humanity, and not only the intellectual, but the social, emotional, and moral development of our species. In my area, I will suggest to you that neuroscience brings a new approach to learning, enhancing our capacity to teach those individuals who are neglected, especially those who have differences, not disabilities, but differences in how they learn. One of the speakers last night also spoke about a win-win. Well, part of the leitmotiv from my talk are the win-wins when we understand what are the strengths in reconceptualizing disabilities, reconceptualizing not only the differences, but the differences in weakness we know, the differences in strengths are something that I want to hope to give you an example of, because an understanding of how all individuals differ helps us educate better everyone. So I will be using reading and the challenges to reading as an example of these premises, but I need you to know, especially those of you who are immersed in the digital world, which is another part of the books that I've written recently, we literally are changing the networks of our brain with not only what we read, but how we read. And this will change our future of our species. Learning disabilities, reading disabilities, gives us an opportunity to look at how education promotes not just this intellectual development, but our ethical development, our moral development. One of the charges of your organization is to enhance the moral and ethical formation of our young. This is part of our work. But understanding the disenfranchised, understanding the underprivileged, what you might call educational poverty, gives us also a look at how cerebral diversity of strength has made us a species like we are. 6,000 years ago, we invented literacy. The same people who have dyslexia today did not have dyslexia 6,000 years ago. The reason why that brain is here today is because, one, at least 5 to 10% of you especially you with entrepreneurs, have the particularities of a brain organization difference that makes you think differently and act differently from linear brains like mine, and I think like yours. The reality is that neuroscience helps us understand circuitries in the brain, and those circuitries, understanding them of typical development and atypical development, helps us do a better job of educating everyone. But I need you to know two things. Now, some of you might not have the same reading brain that I do because you speak Japanese or Chinese. The reading circuit changes according to the writing system. It changes according to the formation, the language privilege, the language impoverishment. We are, however, in a new hinge moment in terms of communication, where the digital medium is changing us for good and for ill. Now, it gives us these extraordinary educational poverties. This little picture takes place with a group of children in Ethiopia who have no school, no anything, but we are taking digital tablets to give them precursors of literacy. I am not a foe of technology. I am a scholar of the assets and the threats that it poses for us. Now, for you to understand what can be lost, I need 4 minutes of your time to understand what you do and how it develops. And I am thinking of when you say what comes next, please understand that literacy begins at birth. Between 0 and 5, some of the most important aspects of language and cognition happen. And for those who the preferential care, the preferential thinking for the poor and underprivileged, it begins between 0 and 5, where the Matthew effect, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, is a reality for so much of our children. If I have 3 words for 0 to 5 to parents around the world, it's read, talk, and sing. This literally changes the language activation regions in our brain and prepares us at 5 and 6 to have this, if you will, platform for what all of you do, you who are expert deep readers. But what few of you understand is that what you have learned is to bring some of the most sophisticated processes that we possess cognitively to that reading network. Background knowledge, what you know influences what you are reading. One of the least and most neglected aspects of what literacy and reading gives is part of our work together, and that is empathy. The passing over into the lives and feelings of others is a moral laboratory for compassion that we can all participate in. Equally important and equally neglected right now in the presence of, actually, again, I'm going to say Monsignor Sanchez Sorondo has taught me so much about what is going on in a post-truth society. Critical analysis is the prerequisite for the discernment of truth. Quite literally, your frontal lobes, if they are provided time, are able to evaluate the truth or the lack of it, either by their familiar silos of information that simply confirm what they thought before, or by demagogues who lead people without critical analysis to be able to be swayed into thinking, even though they are intelligence, false hopes, false fears. My teacher, Father John Dunn from Notre Dame, pulls this together and says that what we all are aiming for is wisdom with our educational formation. That is the conjoining of knowledge and love, which is exactly what Pope Francis is saying. I used St. Thomas Aquinas here because he said that I love St. Thomas Aquinas, I know, but what he said was that what we are doing with contemplation, with this highest form, our obligation is to give it away. These are our teachers, and I love the term ministry of teachers, because that's what we are doing when we are in an educational system that we want to give our world. Now, what neuroscience talks to us about in terms of the differences is not simply the weaknesses, but the strengths. And as I said, 10% of you, I have no doubt, are dyslexic or have that kind of brain organization, and you don't even know it. But here are some of those who I happen to know some of them, but there are so many entrepreneurs and artists. But since I'm in Italy, I have done a film for the Smithsonian, Bob, that you probably never saw, in which they ask me, was Leonardo da Vinci dyslexic? Now, I have no time travel, and I know my physicist would tell me it's impossible for me to go back and analyze him, but I have no doubt he was one of the most extraordinary dyslexic brain organizations we ever had. You can ask me this in questions. Now I end with 2 slides. What can we do? What do we do next? Number 1, from 0 to 5, we have a campaign around the world, not just California or the United States, in which we are encouraging and educating parents to read every night that they can, and those who are not literate, telling stories. But to build language regions and cognitive regions between 0 and 5 is essential. At 5, I want assessment possible. Assessment for differences in language, that we can do a better job of targeting our intervention and training teachers on how do we make deep reading across mediums, not only print, which is what I would prefer from the first 10 years, but also digital. How can we teach deep reading across mediums for the future? And we have not even begun to see the kinds of memes we will have in the next future. Finally, I would say that one of the things that I worry most about are our children who were never diagnosed, who were disenfranchised, who for 1,000 different reasons lend themselves to juvenile delinquency, to prison and reform. I want assessment. I want teachers who are able to deal with the differences of our children all throughout the educational system, so that we do not have, in fact, what is amounting to 60% of our people in prisons are young people who have undiagnosed learning disabilities. My final slide is that part of my desire is the reconceptualization, if you will, the regeneration of our whole notion of disabilities, our whole notion that they are different. If there is solidarity in humanity, it is solidarity for all, and that is a win-win. When we learn about others who are different, we learn how to treat the more subtle differences in all our children for the future. And so I end with Pope Francis. Education is above all a matter of love and responsibility, handed down from one generation to another. And so what I leave you with is, let us all be stewards in all the areas that you are seeking to learn about today, but especially those who are the youngest and the most vulnerable of our species. Thank you. Thank you.